Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art and Talk. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk. If you're new to us, Art and Talk is all about meeting artists and being inspired. We embrace the traditional arts and the spiritual arts to bring you diverse and quality interviews to watch and to be inspired by. If you've been watching us for a while, thank you for your continued support. All right, so today our guest is the morning anchor for WPTV Channel 5, and she's also an amazing visual artist, a painter, and we're going to be diving into her art, her journey. We'll be viewing some of her paintings and finding out all about her art. So I'd like to welcome our guest for today, Ashleigh Walters. Hi, Ashleigh, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat. I always love to talk about art. It's fun.
We're so excited to have you here. So welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a treat. I don't know. It'll be fun to talk about this and hear what other people have been up to as well. I know you post this online, so it's always fun to read the comments later and see into that. So it'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of straight off the bat, Ashleigh, I have a question. As we kind of start to begin to dive into your art and your journey, your background, you have a degree in journalism and business and in the fine art in painting. I'm wondering, how did this all begin? In other words, did you have like a clear trajectory in terms of where you wanted your professional life to go? Or was there sort of like, okay, I want to be a painter, but I like this journalism thing? How did all that kind of unfold?
Sure. So my mom likes to joke that I came out of the womb with pencil and paper in hand. That I was always creating and making something, like since childhood. I always had a big, huge cabinet in the kitchen filled with supplies, filled with little odds and ends. So the making part has always been there since the beginning. I was in, I think, about seventh grade when the light bulb went on with the journalism thing, that I could learn something new every single day, be talking to different types of people, and have this just wildly vast experience every day on the job. And so that's where the light bulb went off on that. And fast forward to being in college, I realized that I could go ahead and take those painting classes and get a degree. You couldn't take the classes without pursuing the degree. So I went for it. And you know what? It's amazing how all of my education has been useful in my career, actually. I mean, the art has come up many times in my journalism. I've used the creativity and everything in storytelling. I've painted commercials that have been animated. I mean, it's come up all kinds of different ways. So it's kind of fun how the world kind of takes you in the direction you're meant to go.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So you've actually been able to combine both those fields of your interest and your passion.
Yes, and it's really wonderful. I think anytime you can find something that gives you that tremendous inner peace that just makes you feel so much you. I think I never feel as Ashleigh as when I'm painting and creating. I'm in the moment. That's just who I am. Is I'm a maker. I make things. I love to paint. I love to think about painting. I love to think about creativity. I love to talk to people about their creativity. And when you get to be curious like that too, the journalism part is just a perfect fit because you're curious about people. You're curious about what they're making and why they do things the way they do. And even being in different places in all of my stories, in some place where they're a car mechanic, a place where they collect odds and ends, a place where they do their job and they have their tools in a certain way. All of those visual things I find really fascinating about people.
Mm-hmm. And so that kind of ties into your bio. I was reading that you're really fascinated by what people consider to be ordinary in life.
Right, because I think, it's interesting, the places that we go and what we find important really says so much about us. And my parents, we as a family, we would travel my whole youth. My dad's a pilot, and we'd go on all kinds of different trips to all kinds of different places. And my mom was always kind of a social anthropologist. So she always said that cemeteries and grocery stores say a lot about the communities around them. So when you go to a place, it's great to see the sights and see all the things, you know, that you would expect to want to see. But then to go into a supermarket where people think it's ordinary, that means a billion different things. It's so interesting, right?
Yeah, some tools of wisdom there from your mom that kind of stayed with you.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, even an old shoe can be really interesting to see, and it has a story to tell about the person who used it.
Mhm. And when you're kind of like walking around and seeing things in the world and doing your job and painting and here and there, um, when you see certain things, you just kind of like, how do you experience it, Ashley? Is that's like you see something and then just like a little light bulb goes off and it's just like, wow, that's really something I'd like to explore visually. I might want to paint that. I want to investigate that a little more. I really kind of want to dive into that. Is that how that kind of works for you?
Yeah, it does. So back, I think when I was living in South Carolina in my second job in TV, so I started in Denver, then moved to South Carolina before coming here, which is common, by the way, for journalists to do. Um, I started like really getting into it because having grown up part of my childhood in Denver, those supermarkets were one thing, but then going to South Carolina, the Piggly Wiggly, there'd be a jar of pickled pig's feet that's this big and it's bright red and it's all these things. I started taking photographs. So this is maybe 12 years ago or so. I started taking photographs in the supermarket and thinking about painting them and like which each section says about the people who use it, the way it makes you feel in a different area. But my goodness, I see the inspiration everywhere. I'll see it. I love things that businesses set up to grab attention, you know, big signs and all of that. And I can't quite describe it, but if I see something that makes me feel like this is kind of a bookmark in time for this community or this feeling, whether it's a label or the way that a street looks, I have to stop, like pulling over the car, turning around all the time to take pictures of things that I may paint later. I have hundreds, probably thousands of pictures that I want to paint someday.
Oh, that's such interesting insight. So when you see something that inspiration hits, you might be in the car here or there, and you take a photograph, and then you kind of have a whole reservoir of inspiration to fall back in. And it kind of seems, Ashley, that you find like different things that represent, they're symbolic of people and how they live and how they are, or as you mentioned, like a marker of time, and kind of seeing something visually as a representation of that, and then kind of wanting to express that.
Yes, I think so. And, you know, it's interesting, even, I mean, my sister was always pointing out, she loves art. And she was always painting out how cars in particular, in a painting, you can really tell when that painting was made. And to me, the same happens when you look at the label on a jar or a price tag on, you know, a head of lettuce, that also is like this weird bookmark in time. And I really think during the pandemic, when we watched everybody go for toilet paper and we didn't have all the same choices and we were having to go to other brands that maybe our grandmother didn't use, you know, that we're not used to, that kind of was an interesting, like, jarring thing as well. But yeah, I love to think about the story that is behind something or that could be behind something. And I figure when we look at any artwork, I think we all do that for ourselves. We find our own connection with it. And so I never expect anybody to have the same connection to what I see, but it's fun to hear when somebody does have a connection to something that you make for their own personal reason too.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and look at a video that you have. It's a little sneak peek of you actually painting, and then we'll be looking at some of your other paintings. Is there anything that you want to set up with this before we take a look at it?
Sure. So when you see me painting that first section, that was finishing up a painting I'd been working on for a long time before the pandemic started. And then I decided that that particular painting would be something I would auction off to benefit whatever it was that our community would need. not knowing at the beginning what that would be. Later on, it became, that people were struggling with food insecurity, that food banks were really churning out. They really needed a lot of help. There were lines around the blocks in many cases. So it ended up being auctioned for charity. But yeah, you'll see kind of my process partway through that kind of like ugly part of the painting process and that. And then the other is where you'll see, this is actually where I was sitting for 6 months during the pandemic, anchoring morning newscasts. So I started changing the background behind me every day. And with that, it was like people started to connect with it, and I knew they were at home seeing into a glimpse of my home. So that was kind of fun to play with, grabbing different pieces of art and throwing different objects back there.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and we'll take a look.
Yeah, so just, sitting at the easel, sitting watching movies, listening to audiobooks. Everybody has their own place to go. But I love the implied detail sometimes in my paintings, and thinking about those labels. I mean, here in Florida, we have so many orange juices that it seemed like the perfect painting to share with the community, because it felt so Florida, but it also felt so normal. It's like, oh yeah, that the shelves can be fully stocked, and it's possible. And here it is, all completed before it was auctioned off. So that's that orange juice painting. And then here you'll see clips of anchoring with the background changing every day, which was kind of fun way to have that journalism and art connect in my life again.
The growing call for more unemployment benefits. The nation faces a childcare crisis, the career path that's in very high demand. You should be wearing a mask anywhere you go in Palm.
Yeah, I love how you keep switching it up. Oh, there's the toilet paper thing.
Yeah, it was actually so interesting being at home, because I could grab props and literally, like, all my oddball collections, all my odd objects that I keep around the house, and people would ask me questions about it. And it started a conversation about my artwork that was very different with the viewers, and to be able to kind of, have that conversation too was really fun.
Helping struggling farmers, advice it's giving to other businesses trying to reopen.
So this went on for a solid 6 months. I think it was like 94 shows, 94 different backgrounds.
Mhm.
It's just kind of wacky. So yeah, this is just a piece of the clip, honestly, that goes on for a long time. But it's just been such an interesting time to have this world into people's personal lives, really. I don't think that ever before have people seen into journalists' houses in this way. And it's been funny. Even our dog Lucas, who ended up passing away last year, but he was in the props several times when we had to talk about pets in the pandemic. It was kind of amazing to have him here.
Busted the creative way some companies are making sure you're really working from home and not goofing off. As the temperature rises, we have expert advice. The exact date the Florida Keys will reopen
Yeah,
to visitors.
it's been kind of fun, just walking around the house in the middle of the night. I was always plucking things. I wake up, my shift would start at 2 a.m. and I'd be creeping around the house in the dark, trying not to wake my husband. Putting that together.
Yeah, and that's such a beautiful way for viewers to be able to, kind of see a little more of Ashleigh and how you live, and of course your art, and as well as, doing, your morning anchor routine as well.
Yeah, it was interesting. And it's been fun, when you are able to connect with the viewers about what they create or what's bringing them peace. And there were several times I've flipped things around. I ended up leading a child's painting birthday party at one point during the pandemic, and teaching people how to make things for gifts for people who were far away. And doing all of that through the power of our computer. So it was kind of a fun way to see other artists do that as well, where people really they created a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that, because obviously this is something globally that everybody, has experienced, each in their own way. And we've had, several artists come on, and one of the main things that they talk about is, how they spent, time during the pandemic, and, different creative juices that were going. And in some cases that was not necessarily the case, but it's always interesting to see kind of how how each artist has, kind of experienced that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, it's an interesting to see how the art has evolved in some cases too. I don't know. It's been, to challenge yourself to slow down and do things in more detail or with different subject matter too. It's been really interesting.
Mhm. Let's dive into your paintings. I'd like for you to touch upon, if you would please, Ashleigh, talk to us about light. In your bio, you were saying, talking about light, which is obviously a major component to a visual artist, and being aware of that in their art expression. And also you said light in people as well. Could you kind of tap into that?
Yes, of course. I think, first of all, starting with the people part, and I think, when I paint, at least when I personally look back on my paintings, I can feel the emotion of whatever I was going through in that time. So joy, sadness, whatever it is, it does come out. I love to find the resilience and the beauty in people, and it exists just in so many ways, in so many vast types of experience, which is that journalistic part where I feel like such an honor to be there for like those highs and lows that people are willing to share. That's tremendous. And then when it comes to the light, the contrast, I love black to white. Like I just love really deep contrast. I love heavy shadows. I love light pouring through things and glistening off of things. And, I push the color and the dark and the light way harder than it probably looks to the eye in many cases. But I just love to do that. I can't resist.
And your compositions are so interesting as well. Some of them you feel like you're kind of like have that bird's eye view, kind of like looking down. And there's always a very interesting placement. Does the composition just come naturally to you, and just kind of having that creative placement?
Yeah, I think that the composition is a huge part of when I'm thinking about, even if I've snapped a bunch of pictures, for example, changing where those borders, in some ways, just like a camera shooting a story, you can say sometimes the parts you leave out are just as important as the parts you leave in. So knowing where to kind of draw the line can make a huge difference in the composition. And I know when I go back in using photos, and sometimes I do paint from life as well, but we're all set up a still life with a lamp and all of that. But when I work with photos, and probably the other way as well, but I end up moving things as I go, where it feels like, what, that needs to be pushed back in the shelf. That one shouldn't be there. And then I will add colors that don't exist in life. So it's not like anywhere like photorealism. Wouldn't put myself in that category with those incredible people who do that. It's a more of an impression from my angle. I don't know quite how to put the words into it, but it feels right to my eye when I end up doing it that way.
Mhm. So it's a lot of kind of going by feel, and getting the colors and your vision, and having it representational, but as you said, kind of giving it an impressionistic feel as well.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the composition also is not just about the shapes and the darks and lights. It's also like where you place that punch of color. Um, focal points aren't as important. Sometimes I like it where the eye is moving and dancing around the canvas somewhat. sometimes there is a very clear focal point, but it's not as obvious, I think, in my work as it is with a lot of others. But I do think about balance, and yeah, I think it has to feel somehow, the weight of the darks and the lights somehow feels like it balances out, that it's not super weighty on one side, and that punch of color somehow is in there, just so I don't know. I love color, and I love, somebody once asked me, oh, how is your, your home before I met my husband, we were together. How it, like, what are your main colors that you use in your home? And it's like, what color don't I use? It's like all of the colors are possible. And of course you find certain colors kind of come out as themes in your life, where I do a lot with greens and oranges and yellows and blues and stuff like that, where you see a lot of that. But I don't know, the balance, I think, kind of comes into play as well.
I think, Ashleigh, you beautifully incorporate all those elements so well in your paintings.
Thank you. It's really sweet of you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel, before we actually look at a little bit more of your paintings, do you feel a sense of timelessness, like when you're in your studio and you're painting? Is there just sort of like the world kind of goes away, and it's just like you're just like in the moment and just exploring this like deep inner creative world?
Yeah, I do. I think, my work is very time sensitive. Everything is a deadline. Can be very stressful, literally down to the second every day. We know exactly how long something's going to be. I know what 30 seconds feels like. Everything is just so precise, and deadline always coming up. So that is great. But this puts me very much into a place where I can really be present and like really feel the texture of the moment and think about that. And I had another artist tell me, she was somebody who liked to meditate. And I said, well, I don't, I've never really tried to meditate. I don't really know. She said, Ashleigh, you always do. You do when you paint. And I had never thought about it like that way. Like, you are truly in the moment. Like it calms me, like in a way, like going to church. It's like you feel this like just, I feel like Ashleigh comes back together when I'm painting, and I feel very complete with that. And it just gives me tremendous joy to do it.
Wow, that is so rich and so beautiful and so full. So you have, your profession as a morning anchor, but as you're elaborating, it's this painting, this whole art world that really brings you that sense of, like, as you said, like completeness and like oneness and wholeness, and just really feeling like who you are.
Yeah. And I encourage anybody I think when there's something that happens when a lot of us grow up and you start to get fearful, like, oh, I don't draw, or I wasn't good at that, or I forgot how I used to be good as a kid. For some reason, I didn't ever grow out of that. And I would encourage anybody to recognize that, like, this can give you tremendous fulfillment. You're going to have things you make that you're like, that's not at all what I thought it would look like. And that's okay. And it's just a wonderful place to be and to express and to just feel yourself. It's great. It's a great feeling.
Oh, I love that. Let's go ahead, Ashleigh, and let's take a look at some of your paintings.
Great.
All right, let's go ahead and pull that up. Okay. All right.
Okay. Yes. So this one is a bag of cuties, those mandarins, and the netting that this is one of those examples. So this is a still life that I set up with a lamp. And so I have this big bag of cuties, and I love the texture. I love the color. I love thinking about the transparency of the net and that shadow coming through, and like how the shadow might be very heavy, but also lighter and more airy in other spots. And, I probably set up and took 20 different pictures of this, maybe more, where I peeled that peel a little differently. I ripped the bag. I pushed it to the side. you play with it until suddenly that's like, okay, that feels really good. And then there are those little pockets where, like I was talking about, where you're going to see some of the colors maybe that don't completely exist in life. And that would be like under that little orange that's exposed off to the right-hand side, closest to the light source, that little pop of blue in some of those shadows. That is just something that to me feels like it needs to be nestled in there. But again, that black in between the cuties, like deep black, all the way to the super extreme white. And I like to play with the background as well. I mean, that yellowy acid yellow that was not what was there. You know, I got to choose that, but I love to push that where the lightness comes across and splashes, and it changes the color as it goes across the tabletop as well. But you're right, I like that kind of aerial view sometimes, looking straight at something from a different angle. It's kind of fun.
And Ashleigh, what medium do you work in?
Acrylic mostly, sometimes watercolor, sometimes oil. I just always end up back with acrylic. I don't know what it is. Just that's one of my happy places.
Mhm. And there's such a lightness and almost like an airiness, but yet like a grounding too. It's just a beautiful composition of sorts within the composition of the painting.
Yeah, and you know, it's meant, I guess, I don't know how to explain it. It always ends up coming out like it may feel playful, but there is something grounded about my paintings. I think it's just how it happens with me. It's not necessarily a silliness, like no matter how wild and outlandish it can go. But yeah, it feels kind of grounded, I think. But yeah, it's fun to play with those little compositions with the peel turned and twisted in different ways. And I love the shadows that happen, especially with organic things. So fun.
Mhm, mhm. And your sense of texture really comes through too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's fun to see new textures and see like how, if I played with that, how would that work?
Mhm. Yeah. All
Hmm.
right, let's go to the next one. Okay.
Yeah, so this one is cake decorating aisle. And, you know, I have so many of pictures of the different sections, but this one in particular felt like nobody ever visits this part of the store without good intentions in mind.
Mhm.
And so I love repetition too. Patterns and repetition of shape just is very appealing to my eye. And pushing again those deep dark blacks. The shelf doesn't really ever get that dark in a supermarket, really. But to me, it looks like it should be pushed back that hard. And this is another example where I moved things around. I turned boxes after the fact and, you know, played with that and suggested some of the details and pushed details harder in other spots. And it's fun to study. Like once you start painting and you really try to observe things as well, you start to appreciate certain little choices, like the Pillsbury Doughboy, you know, not really ever having taken a close look at him, how they put him into all these different positions and his little expression, or the shiny bags of chocolate and how those kind of drape across each other, like fitting like little, I don't know, little mattresses. It's just so fun to see how all of the different, you know, product makers have tried to catch your eye on a shelf.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, you're getting into so many interesting areas with looking at the packaging and the marketing, all the different, visual aspects as well. And the attention to detail with this is quite astounding.
Yeah, it's really, this one felt like a big turning point for me, actually, in terms of pushing the detail in paintings and going a little bigger than some of I'd painted large before, but you know, this was kind of a fun turning point. And was just starting to get into the series with the grocery store. I've done those now several times, but I think to this point, maybe I'd done one or two. And so this one was like, let's just tackle a big, huge chunk and see what happens. And I really enjoyed this painting. It felt just like it showed me some new things about myself.
Mhm. And can you tell us approximately the size of it, Ashleigh?
Yeah, this is 36 by 36. And I don't know what it is too, the shape of the canvas. I tend to enjoy square canvases a lot of the time. I think it's again that balance and symmetry and something about that maybe. Not always, but square shapes seem to be kind of fun for me right now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Who knows? One day it could be giant oblong, long skinny ones. Who knows?
And roughly, Ashleigh, how long do your paintings take? Or let's say, for example, this one.
Gosh, it's so hard to nail down. So I end up having, right now, I probably have 10 paintings in the works. So I will have different sizes, and some of them I will also just want to sit down and paint and be done and there, like boom, that's one painting in one day or one sitting. So something like this, I mean, this was where I'd come back over the course of several months. So I would paint for even 4 or 5 hours if I had it at a time, and do that for a couple of days and then step away for 3 weeks and come back. So I really, this one, I really lost track of how long. I don't know. It just kind of kept building. And then there's that weird day that happens. And this is also interesting. And I'm sure that other artists have experienced this, but where you say, I feel like it's done now. And I don't know why, because I could continue to work on this painting forever and refine it. But then I just feel like, okay, that's it. Feels like it's done. It feels like it's, that's all wrapped up. I don't know how to quite put that, but it just, you feel it coming and you're like, I think we're almost there. And then it's there and it's done.
I'm so glad that you shared that, because I think that's a common point of interest with artists is like, okay, when are you actually finished? Because as you mentioned, you could be like, okay, well, wait a minute, let me get to this. Oh, wait, but I just saw this, and it can go on and on. But there's that sense, that sort of like inner guidance or inner clock that says, okay, it is now complete. And you feel, as you were saying, that sense of completeness, and then you move on to the next one.
Yeah, you said it very well right there. I think that yeah, it could really just go on forever and ever. I mean, you could paint one tiny little square of this for just forever, and just really keep trying to work at it or not be happy with something about it. And there has to come a point in my paintings, at least, where I say, I make peace with it, even if it's not perfect in my eyes. It is what it is. It is the way it should be. And now I move forward.
I think it's absolutely amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
Let's go to the next one. All right.
Yeah, so this is more recent. This one is, so growing up, these are things that I didn't drink at my house. We never had Sunny D. I feel like Sunny D was always a juice at some other kid's house, like when everybody was like out playing in the yard. But there's something about Sunny D that feels like this slice of America and a certain way that it is. And it's not a fancy, expensive drink. It's quite the opposite. It's something you can buy at the dollar store, but it's also like filled with joy. So as inexpensive and perhaps not particularly nutritious, it actually says 100% vitamin C instead of 100%, orange juice or something. It's, I don't know, it has that thing that makes you feel there's a joy to it, and there's a place that it has in people's lives, and there's nostalgia to it. And then the champagne is something that is more like the partier of today would be like, yes, let's pop a bottle of champagne for a mimosa, which just feels like this other thing that is like a different part of life. A younger person probably, maybe, or somebody out to brunch who's out and having that. So it felt like the tension of those two things, but the color united them all. And the champagne flute is actually the Tiffany glasses that we had for our wedding toast. So that has kind of the only part of it that really feels like personal to me. But I will tell you that these two drinks put together, they don't belong together. It tastes terrible. But I loved the contrast of the feel of like celebration and joy. It's not nutritious, but it's there for the moment. And I liked that kind of that tension that was happening.
Yeah, I love that, the celebration and the joy. And it's such a beautiful elaboration, Ashleigh. Looking at the Sunny D and what you feel like that represents, what it's symbolic of, and then kind of pairing it with the champagne. And as you were speaking and as I was looking, I was thinking that it almost, to me, in a way, feels like the flute is almost a unifying element in the sense that it's in the center and it's kind of like combining both of the beverages, to actually make a mimosa. And it's such fascinating insight to hear your perspective on how you view this painting and what this means to you and what it has to say in your message.
I think, it's fun, no matter how much you earn in your lifetime, no matter how much or little as you have, the finest things you own always will contrast with the regularity of life, right? And sometimes the stuff that's like seems so ordinary to people also, like that has that little nostalgia, like Fleischmann's margarine, that will always make me think of my grandma and my mom cooking and baking because that's the kind that they chose. And so, yeah, it's a stick of butter, right? Like, so what? It's just a thing of Sunny D. It's just a thing of champagne, but it does have that. I like that feeling, like that it has a purpose, like an old friend,
Yeah, that's so beautiful. All right, let's go to the next one.
So this is just a sign that I had admired so much. It's in downtown West Palm Beach, right off Dixie Highway, Hall Hardware. I love signs that just have really taken things to the next level or feel handmade and special to a place. I love that when business owners, they put so much on the line and they work really hard, and it takes some serious grit to do that. So when they put up any kind of a sign that like feels homemade or like just driving home their thing in a really special way, it just draws me in. And I don't know, I finally had pulled over and, you can walk around signs, you can look at things so many different ways. And I just love the intersection of lines and the way that the eye goes when you look at power lines and all of these things connecting again with the light splashing down. I love the shadows that the sign itself casts across the stop sign, the shadows in the edge of that Hall Hardware, that swooping thing. Those, again, like that makes me so excited to paint those little details at the end. I get really like, ooh, I can't wait to get in there and get in that shadow. So that's fun.
Yeah, and the detail again is amazing, and work after work of yours, and such an interesting perspective and such an interesting sense of movement. And as you were elaborating earlier, Ashleigh, you really like as you said, like the dance of the painting where the eye moves around. You so effectively execute that.
Thank you. Yeah, even when there's this something that journalism, you can be considered an MMJ, a multimedia journalist, where you shoot and edit your own video while you're also reporting. So you're like a one-man show. And so when I would shoot video, I loved that part of it where you could get to see the same objects, but you move way under them, you move way out. You can really, if you think about an object can just be sitting there on the table, or you yourself can move around it and change the perspective. I love to look up, and I've done a few paintings in that perspective of looking way up. I have some more planned or in the works with the same kind of perspective, because there's something about that I like, that the visual clutter of some of it kind of also melts away, and that somehow this is given importance too. I like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, Ashleigh, can we touch upon your creative process we know that you like to photograph something that gives you inspiration, that you're just like, wow, this is really interesting and captures your eye. And then perhaps you'll bring it back into your studio and paint it. So now once you have an idea of what you're going to paint, perhaps based on one of your photographs, you have your canvas. Are there preliminary sketches? Do you sketch out on the canvas? What is your like method that you kind of move into?
Yeah, so I am rarely do I do preliminary sketches, which probably is part of the reason every once in a while I'm like, this was not as successful as it could have been, because if I had taken the time to slow down, I just love to jump in there. And there's something about it that's like the first time out of the gate, that's the one I want to work on. So yeah, I will sketch out the detail as fine as I want to go and try to get the proportions right, knowing that a good sketch can make or break the final product so much. And getting that composition just right, I think is that can be challenging too, especially when you're looking at something that has so much detail, like the cakes, or even this, again, where you're talking about like so many, I could have slid where this is in the middle of the canvas, or I'm just focusing on this and you don't see it. It changes the entire composition. So that's like the sketching, and that planning part is a big part. In fact, I would say in some ways deciding what to paint and how to paint it is the hardest part. The easier part is like painting it. Like the wheels have to, you could just do a billion different things. So narrowing it down and making the decision, like this one is going to be on canvas, I'm going to invest my time with it, is a big step. And then once I get in there, I like to think about the largest portion of the painting is going to have to be the first piece that I work on, because every other color will be dictated like a chain reaction off of that. So if I'm going to paint all the shoes and then go in there and decide what color this is going to be, it's going to be really hard to make something that I think relates well to all the little stuff. So it's hard to do, but I hold back on all the fun bits and pieces and the details until I've established and laid out. There are times I go back and I'm like, this background color thing is just not working for me. That big dominant color, I have to rework that, and I will. I'll completely change the whole entire thing with all the shadows and everything. I've done that many times, but yeah, like that, I have got to start the big chunks typically and work down to the fine parts. And then at the end, I love to do the highlights, the tiny details, the bright whites often are the things that I leave for the very last, because they really pop with the eye. So that tends to be kind of that last final step.
That gives us great insight into kind of like how your creative mind and creative process unfolds for you. And it has like a structure to it. It's not super loose, because you really want to be kind of broad and then kind of move down, and there's different steps that go into it. But you also love, as you said, like the spontaneity. But then you were saying, like, which I found so fascinating, like the hardest thing is like, it seems like you have like all these great ideas and it's like, oh my gosh, I want to do them all. But then you have to kind of narrow it down. And then once you do, it kind of, that seems to set like the ball rolling, and then everything seems to fall into place.
Yeah, I have books like this that are just filled with ideas for things that I may want to paint, things that I could put together, ideas for things like, I don't know, like cheap peppermints I have written down, or scratch off tickets, like things that feel like they could potentially be there. And then, or it's like the thousands of pictures that I have to choose from, and then choosing the one that I think is the best. And sometimes, even though it's the best of the best, it's still not quite right. So I have to like decide how to work with that. So totally the thought process, the planning, the deciding to, it's like a relationship. Like, do I really want to spend time with this painting? Because that's an investment of my time and of me. So that can be often the hardest part of the process.
Mhm. I have a couple questions for you, Ashleigh. When we were looking at some of your paintings, you were saying like, it's kind of like visiting a friend. Um, Once you paint something, and these are all relatable imagery, like the grocery store, the food, the shoes, and whatnot, all that we've kind of explored. Um, when you go back, like let's just use the sweets, all the different like baking
Yeah.
um, products and whatnot. Now, when you go back after you painted something like this, and you've had so much mental and visual awareness, hour after hour, day after day, however long you worked for it, and it's complete, and it's just really been absorbed in your awareness, and it's just like a magical thing that you've now painted it, and then you go back into the store in that same spot. Now, is there like a revelation when you're in that spot? Do you see it differently? Is it like, oh my gosh, these are like my friends, I know you so well? Well, what is that like for you?
All of that kind of happens. And first of all, when I see a painting on the wall, there are times I'm like, I did that? Like, that's so weird. Like I did all that, but like, that's, whoa, like that is something that I created. It's kind of this, I don't know. It's different seeing it once it's all finished. I'll explain it. So, again, sometimes it doesn't come out exactly what you wanted, or it's way better than you ever expected. But yeah, when I go back like to the cake aisle, I see certain objects that, those little candles, and I know really like I have a more intimate relationship with them. And it's also when I see other cake aisles at different stores, I really recognize the differences, that moment in that particular store on that particular day was one thing, but in every other place, it's going to have a little different twist. Like, oh yeah, so they have like that's, oh, should I try this again? Should I go in closer? Like I just can't resist. So it's, yeah, I kind of have all of those experiences that you've described.
And Ashleigh, what would you say is your core message through your paintings?
Gosh, I think it's humanity. Like it's what makes us who we are, and just in simpler form. It's the day-to-day things that connect the dots between those huge big life experiences sometimes actually add up to be far more important. So while we gear ourselves up for these big huge celebrations and everything, the stuff we do on a regular day is really very important to us as well. And I don't know, you think about the people you've loved in your life. You didn't just think about those huge big moments. Of course, those mattered, but you think about the little in-betweens, and these are all kind of the little in-betweens.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's almost like a collection of beautiful moments. Like your paintings are a connector, a connection between people, humanity on the large, or as you were saying, loved ones with the Fleshman's butter and your grandmother. And it's almost like this like unifying aspect through your painting to kind of connect all these familiar, kind of like almost like everyday experiences, objects, feelings, emotions that play in our lives and society and ourselves and our friends, our relationships.
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, I don't know, the people, when you really get to know people and you think about the texture of the things that they use. I mean, I can picture like like when I was a child sitting in my dad's lap, we're reading the comics in his big leather chair. And I remember what the smell of the coffee, remember what his, watch in his hand looked like. And those things connect me with my dad in a way that nothing else ever can. So I think that, yeah, those little, the stuff people think is ordinary has great importance to me,
Yeah, and so that really ties back to the beginning of the interview. Like, really, we get a real full body kind of insight and explanation into how you view the ordinary, and then, of course, how it comes out in your art also. And I've been wondering, Ashleigh, there seems to be a sense or an influence, and I'm not sure, so you'll have to let me know, with like a consumerism, like, a different spin? Is there an influence of Andy Warhol at all in your art, or as one of your artist influences per se?
Oh, Wayne Thiebaud with his, I mean, not just the cakes, but the repetition of like a bunch of hot dogs or things in a case, or even the landscapes that he would do, cityscapes, and the color and the choices, to kind of clear out some of the clutter and really allow us to see some of that. That really has connected with me. Ralph Goings, who's tremendous. I mean, the realism and the ability to capture like diner food, but in a way that's just pushes, the reflection in a napkin holder, stretching around those things. I mean, time in diners, like growing up and just in life, some of my best conversations have happened over like a cup of coffee and some pancakes at a diner, and that's like, those, I wouldn't trade those for any fancy meal, where nothing happened. Like that's way more cool. So yeah, there are a lot of artists, even abstract artists who I feel are just very powerful to me. And, in terms of consumerism, I totally can see that. I see consumerism and capitalism, in all of this, not, there's no negativity in that. It's just, it is what it is. It's trying to just be a snapshot, just like journalism. Like it just is supposed to reflect what it is, joyful, whatever it is, that hard work that goes behind it. I don't know. I guess that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, beautifully said. I have a couple questions for you. I'm wondering if you could, Ashleigh, possibly offer some advice. There are artists, some who are highly devoted to their art, very passionate about their art, and have a gift to give to society. Some of them feel perhaps a little bit more of a challenge in articulating publicly about their art and about the message and all of this and that. So where you have this great fluency and ability to really hone in and share with us your art and what it's about and where it's coming from, what advice would you give to an artist to kind of encourage them and help them maybe get over that public speaking about their art?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I totally get it. I think when we like share our art, I know for a long time I was nervous to even like display things to others, like, it feels so personal. I actually had a dear friend of mine who had been out shooting a story, and she walked into this restaurant where she was shooting the story, and they had no art on their walls. And because the artist just hadn't shown up, there was some issue. And so she convinced me to go in there for cocktails one evening and had me sit with her at the bar and introduced me to the manager. And then she basically like put me on the spot and said, they need an artist, show them your work. It's like, oh my gosh, like, are you seriously doing this to me? And they saw a few pictures that I had on the phone and asked if I would fill their place. So that made me take literally everything out of my home and bring it, like literally everything, like the good, the bad, the ugly, it's on display. And it's like, oh my gosh. And now you have to price it. And now people are looking at it and they're strangers. That was overwhelming, much less to share it on social media or, on television or a Zoom interview with you. It's like, oh my gosh. So I think what it is that you just have to kind of get out of your own way sometimes and just show up, and it's okay. And there are going to be people who do love your work. It may really surprise you how many people love what you're doing. And there may be people who are like, I don't get it, or I don't like it. And that's also okay. But that's a huge step. And you should be very proud of yourself when you take it, because that's a big deal. And I think it's also kind of, I was never in fine arts school when we'd have to get up and share a piece and get critiqued. The critique part was one thing, but trying to explain my process and where I was coming from and why, the self-portrait is this way. There were kids, it felt like they just like that, their whole thought process about it was all figured out. And it's like, it's not an easy thing to do. I think you kind of have to put it out there and then just try to explain it. Why did you choose to paint that thing? Why did you choose to sculpt that thing? And why did you choose those materials? And it's okay to not have a grand explanation, but be authentic about it and be honest about it. And I think that will totally come through. And I think people will celebrate you more than you expect.
Oh, that was beautiful, Ashleigh. Thank you. As we're getting ready to close out the show, is there anything that we haven't touched upon in your art, in your artistic journey that you would like to share? And if you could just kind of update us, you said you had about 10 different paintings going on. So if you could just let us know what's currently going on.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I have, let's see, I have a painting over here that's out of a dollar store where the balloons get filled up with the helium. And there are also those little things you stick a quarter in and turn and the plastic bubble comes out with a toy inside. I have that going on. I have like a little parking lot from Palm Beach that's in the works. I have a couple of sign paintings that are in the works. I have a little, this one's closing in, cheese balls, which again, not something that we had around as kids. It was like always super healthy, but this for some reason gives me such tremendous joy to see some huge carton. Let's see, gosh, there's so many going on. My poor husband's like, you need to stop starting new ones. It's like, okay, let's wrap some of these up. That's good. Like no more. But yeah, there's a whole bunch. There's some shoes going on. There's some sunglass racks from a local wonderful store that's a consignment shop that just has all these different styles. That one's happening. So way too many to count. And the only other thing I would say is I love the conversation that artists can have. And I find it to be a pretty encouraging and good-hearted community when people get together and talk about art. And I really welcome any critique and suggestion you can all offer as well, just that it keeps to go back and forth. I will also say that I love to do stories for TV news about artists and people who make things and who are creative in their vision. And so don't ever hesitate to reach out to me or another journalist and try, because you never know, maybe we can help you share your story for you. And that's also really, really fun for me.
I appreciate you saying that, Ashleigh. I love your joy and enthusiasm for life and how you point us to kind of pay attention to the ordinary and to, I also feel like through your paintings, you're like, okay, just be in the moment and look around. There's just so much going on. And there's such a joy in your paintings as well that really comes through, in addition to all that, the technical aspects and the whole creative process. You really bring that completely into a full package.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a treat to speak with you. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Ashleigh. We always let our guests provide closing comments. If there's anything else you'd like to add, Ashleigh, and if you could let us know how to stay connected with you.
Yes. Okay. So my art website is ashleighwalters.net. I also own ashleighwalters.com, but if you look for ashleighwalters.net, that's the one with the paintings, ASHLEIGH. That's how you spell my first name. I do have a few paintings at Gallery Biba, which is on beautiful Worth Avenue in Palm Beach. Just love this gallery, love the choices in art. So if you just pop in there just to see the work that she has selected, it's just beautiful. And you can reach out to me on Instagram. I have 2 Instagram pages, Ashleigh Walters or Ashleigh Pics. You should be able to find the first one, and then that'll take you to the second if you're looking. But you can find me on email, awalters@wptv.com. Reach out any which way. Facebook, I have a very active Facebook account to look for that. So anyway, I try to read all of the messages. I get about 900 emails a day, but I really do go through them. And I'd love to talk to people about their art. So share what you're up to.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Ashley. You've shared so much with us, and it's been a joy to connect with you and to dive into your art and your journey and kind of get a, take us into this whole inner world, this whole inner space of you and your creativity and your influences. Thank you so much,
Thank you. Thank you for your time. It was an honor.
Ashley. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching Art and Talk today. Please stay connected with us on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Please share, like, and stay connected with us. And we'll talk soon on the next Art and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed.